Hey friends, welcome to our Midweek Moment. Pastor Nicole here. So glad you clicked on. Well, this week we finished up our sermon series, Rooted, a study in Colossians, looking through the 4th chapter of that letter and seeing what we could learn, seeing what we could glean. And I think the most powerful part of that letter, of that part of the letter for me, because it's kind of just a wrap up. You know, Paul's just kind of wrapping things up. So it's not like a lot of deep theology. But I think he gives us a really important piece of advice in that he says we should be intentional about how we connect with people outside of the walls of our congregation. Let me read to you the passage of scripture that I want to share with you. So this is Colossians 4, verses 5 and 6. Act wisely toward outsiders, making the most of the opportunity. Your speech should always be gracious and sprinkled with insight so that you may know how to respond to every person. So we talked this weekend about how Paul calls us to be in conversation with people outside of the church, to not just be in conversation with them, but to be in conversations that are meaningful and, you know, aren't just like, oh, hey, neighbor, how are you? But to really get to know people, to really take the time to engage in conversation, not boring conversation, but conversation. In some translations it says seasoned with salt, which just means conversations that are palatable, conversations that are exciting, not bland and boring, but good conversation, which means we've got to be good listeners and ask questions, to be curious when we engage with people. I had an experience today that reminded me of that passage of scripture. For many years, I served a church where I would often go to the same restaurant and I would order the same thing. Maybe you're like that, right? Like you give one dish that you like at the restaurant and that's what you always order. So as I was wrapping up my time in this community, because I was being appointed here to Willow Hill, I went in and I just said, hey, there are two guys that work there all the time. So I would see them every time I was in there. I tended to go on the same day at the same time whenever I would go. And I just said, hey, I'm moving out of the community, but if I ever come back, I will stop by because I will love and miss your food. Today, I happened to be back in that community for a separate reason, and I had some time at lunch, and I thought, oh, I am going to go stop and get my dish at this restaurant. It's a chicken gyro, no tomatoes. So I walked in. It's been 2.5 years. I didn't expect any kind of greeting, didn't even expect the same people to be working, quite frankly. And it was the same two guys behind the counter, and they're like, hey, how are you? And they were like, chicken gyro, no tomatoes? And I was so touched in that moment that they remembered me, that they remembered my order. And I just immediately thought of this passage from Paul of how important it is for us to interact and have conversation with people outside of our church community. Now, I wasn't trying to convert these guys to Christianity. They didn't even know I was a pastor. But we had lots of conversation over the years. We would just chat about all sorts of things. One day I had a necklace on and the necklace broke and the beads went everywhere, and they like came out from behind the desk to come and help me pick up the beads, and they were so like, oh, we're so sorry. You know, like those are the kind of conversations that Paul is calling us to have. Those kind of relationships where, you know, we're just there to share the love of God with somebody, to bring a smile to somebody's face, to connect with people, to let them know that they're appreciated. And it just really kind of hit home today when those guys were there to welcome me, and we had a nice little conversation, kind of catching up on all that's been going on in the past 2.5 years. And I left there thinking, wow, that's the importance of community. That's the importance of connecting with people, of just listening well and asking good questions and sharing about yourself too, and just kind of letting natural conversation flow. So as I was leaving, I was like, man, that's like the perfect illustration for that passage of scripture. I wish I had had that to share for my sermon, but I thought, you know what? Perfect for the midweek moment. What a great reminder of the ways that we can just simply connect with people in our community. Go to the same place at the same time, see the same people, strike up a conversation, be curious, get to know somebody. That is the work of God. That is building the kingdom, because Jesus is all about relationships. And anytime that we can form a relationship, and that we can be a good friend, that is the work of God. And so I just want to encourage you today to go out and have a conversation with somebody. Don't make it creepy, but just naturally get to know somebody. And it might take some time. You're not going to have deep conversations the first time you meet somebody, but hopefully over time you can get to know, maybe it's your neighbors, maybe it's somebody at the local restaurant, maybe it's somebody at the pharmacy desk that you see all the time. But get to know people, reach out, step out of your comfort zone, and make those connections. It's so important for us to do that so that we can share God's love with others. Well, just something for you to think about this week. I hope we will see you this weekend. And I just hope you have a wonderful rest of your week. Get out there, be curious, have good conversations. We'll see y'all soon. Bye.